So today I'll discuss how you can maximize your conference experience as a student, postdoc, or even as a PI. The typical advice that you will probably hear is, first, at a conference, you just go and present your research. So you give a talk or a poster. And second, you should do some networking. So talk to people. These are the typical things that often are told to students before they go to conferences. However, very few people really discuss specific strategies. So I decided to record this episode to provide you with some actionable tips on how you can maximize this conference experience. And if you're a student, some aspects of conferences, they may sound challenging and very intimidating to you. But believe me that even for professors, conferences are not always easy to approach, and they're not very easy to benefit from. Now, I want to mention that because there are different types of conferences, the tips and tricks depend on your situation. The different researchers can have very different goals. And what I'm going to discuss today, all these things you may want to adapt to your own case. Normally, there are two major goals we pursue at conferences. First is networking, and that includes meeting new people, reconnecting with your colleagues, collaborators. And this is a very, very important part of the conference. It's something that you cannot be overstated. Second is getting new ideas and getting new information. For example, I can discuss my research with others. I can listen to their experiences, their results, what they learned in the last year or so about the field. I can also see where the field itself is going, and I can understand the current trends. So all this is obviously super important if you want to stay in academia, and especially if you want to compete for faculty positions. I'm going to go now to different tips that I found myself useful and that I heard also from others. And some tips are a bit more straightforward, others are a bit less obvious. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to follow all of them. You pick the ones that work for you. So let's begin with discussing what you can do before the conference to maximize this outcome. First, many students struggle with approaching their advisor about the conferences. Some professors will remind you about the conferences in advance, but most will expect you to approach them about conferences yourself. They may look like your conference attendance is not so important to them. But in reality, they may just expect you to initiate this, especially when they're very busy. Because most PIs, as PIs, we have no time to track all these conferences for every single student in our group. We have a lot of things to do. Now, how can you approach your PI about the conference and what sort of questions you can ask? First, show the conference will be very valuable to you, that you will use it for, as an opportunity to network, to learn about new developments in your field, to get connected with companies, and of course, to show your own research. That's essential. But basically, you want to make sure the conference will be a very important, it's a necessary step for you in your career. Then, if there is no funding to cover your travel, you can also say that you will explore travel awards from your university, institute, or even from a conference where you go. You can also look for cheaper accommodations, maybe share a room with other students from, say, the same department or from a neighboring group. And in general, when a student does all this homework, this may prompt the advisor to agree and maybe find some funds. But there is another point, that sometimes your advisor may not have funding today, but the conference may be in just 1 year from now. So you can say that you want to apply, and then you will see if money come at the time of the travel. As you probably know, funding can be very difficult to predict, but if you submit an abstract to a conference and you eventually cannot come, just make sure you can email organizers. Every symposium has their own organizers. I worked as an organizer before, and the worst thing is when we have a speaker to give a talk, and that speaker has a dedicated time slot, and the speaker doesn't show up. So please email your organizer, say, okay, I'm not going to come. I have a situation that I don't have funding, and that's totally fine. And that will be the right way to approach this. Now, some PIs also have policies in their labs, and so you want to learn about those policies. You can ask if there are policies in your own group if you're a new student. And the policies can be, for example, that you can apply only for talks, and you cannot just travel overseas with a poster. These things happen, so you want to make sure you know about them. Now, if your conference attendance is already planned, you can share with your colleagues, with your advisor, what you want to do at the conference. So share the plan. And this is something that some students say really helps them. I never tried it myself, but I can imagine that it can be pretty helpful. So what you do is you make a list of things you want to do at a conference. So you want to meet some people, you want to go to these talks, you want to organize maybe a lunch, a dinner, whatever, with others, and then you talk about it to other students and your PI. It creates some kind of peer pressure for you to do these things that you hope to do when you come to the conference. Because the reality is that when you come to a conference, you're often overwhelmed, you're tired, you quickly understand that the conference is actually pretty intense, can be very intense events. Some of them are very big, some of them are small, but they have a lot of talks. So it's hard to commit on site. There is another thing, which is that you want to make sure you can submit the abstract in advance. You want to get the approval from all the co-authors, obviously, but you also want to make sure your advisor is okay with your abstract. Now, the problem that we often see is that students wait until the deadline, and then they send us their abstracts like a day in advance or 5 hours in advance. And if a professor is traveling or is busy and he or she receives, say, 10 abstracts to check, 1 page each, there is maybe not enough time. So make sure you do it maybe a month in advance, maybe a few weeks in advance, but not very close to the deadline. Next, should you go to a bigger or smaller conference? A big conference obviously means more people, but it also means a better diversity of science. They're also somewhat difficult to navigate sometimes, but they're also very fluid. People there have a big choice of talks to attend, obviously. But it also means that they may skip your presentation if there is a big talk happening next door. On the contrary, a small conference gives you much more time to spend with everyone. It's easier usually to get acquainted with new people, and it's definitely better for introverts. So I am an introvert and I absolutely love them. But the diversity of scientific topics and the diversity of communities is rather small there. So which one should you attend? I would suggest trying both. Talk to your advisor, discuss the goals, which options can benefit your career the most. Now, should you go for a poster or a research talk? For a lot of people, this is straightforward. They say, well, of course, for a talk. But in my opinion, this is not so straightforward. In my experience, a talk can be great when you know that a lot of people will be in your session. But it's not quite always the case. So a poster can work out very well when you want to have a lot of one-on-one interactions about your work. So think of what your goal is. So is it to find the next position? Is it to show your research experience? Is it to show what research you've done? Or to get actual experience presenting at a conference? So all these things should be in your equation when you're deciding whether to go for a poster or a talk. There is a general assumption, of course, that a talk is always more prestigious than a poster, and so it must always be better. But like I said, in my view, this is not the case, because even as a PI myself, sometimes I choose poster sessions. And the reason is because I value direct conversations. This is usually difficult at oral presentations, because I really like when we can discuss the work, when a person can ask me questions and I can also ask questions in return. This is a very important aspect of genuine connection. And so if you want to connect with people deeper and better, a great poster session is, in my opinion, always better. Now, the size of the possible audience is also a big factor. For example, when you know that the session will attract a lot of people and then the room will be full, a talk, of course, is a great option. But if the session has a small number of attendees, then say you have 5 or 10 people in the room, then a talk might not be so valuable. I had this situation myself in the past when I had only 5 people attending my talk. And from today's perspective, I think a poster would have been a much better choice back then. So a talk may also be not the best option when your topic is multidisciplinary. For example, myself, I work in electrochemistry, in epitaxy, and in material science. So if my talk is about the fields of epitaxy and catalysis at the same time, and which are completely, by the way, separate fields, then if I apply for a catalysis symposium, then I may miss the entire epitaxial community. So if I go for the epitaxy talk, then I may miss the catalysis people. So if I can show a poster, there's a higher chance that I may be approached by the people from both communities. So I will get feedback from both of them. I will interact with more people. And remember that all parallel sessions, they compete for attendance. This is very important. So if you're giving a talk and there is a parallel session where a high-profile scientist is also speaking, it's quite likely that this person will attract a much bigger audience than you. And your session, your room may have fewer attendees as a result. But because so many researchers see posters as secondary choices, I think it's really important to highlight that they are actually useful. So in my own experience, I think poster sessions are the most helpful and the most fruitful. They give me a lot of this genuine and direct engagement with the people who are really interested in our work. And even though I am a PI today, poster sessions are still my favorite. And there are many reasons for this. So first of all, posters are seen by most people at a conference. Normally, a great poster can be very memorable, like, a great talk. But great talks are rare. And because one talk is often followed by another, you quickly forget what was in the previous talk. But a poster, because of this genuine connection between you and the attendee, because of these interactions that you have, a poster becomes a lot more memorable if you know how to present it. Also, at poster sessions, people, of course, ask a lot more questions, and they're looking at your poster along the way. Obviously, this is not the case during the talk, and often we have a lot of questions in our mind when we see a talk, and those questions remain unanswered. So I think, again, a poster session brings more clarity about the work. Posters also give people time to think about your work. So many scientists, myself including, we don't like these fast-pacing slideshows. We want to make sure we have time to look at data and think. And that's where posters shine. Well, it also doesn't mean that you have to put a lot of data on your poster. Okay, this is where many students make a mistake. They just dump all the data on a tiny poster and it becomes so cluttered, it's so hard to navigate. You want to make sure you correctly present the data. There's another point, that it's easier to evaluate a scientist or a student at the poster session than during the talk. Because a talk is often somewhat rehearsed and it doesn't give an idea about the person so much. Now, it can be a better choice, of course, for PhDs who look for next positions, but also for scientists, I don't think that poster sessions are that bad overall, because you get a chance to talk to a lot more people than during your talk. But there is one thing to keep in mind. You must prepare a really good poster. Like I said, not a cluttered one, but a really good poster. Try to stay also at your poster all the time. The biggest mistakes that I see people making is that they just go away. So you walk down the posters row and you see each third poster having no one nearby. So try to stay at your poster all the time. Just don't go around looking at other posters. unless you think it's absolutely necessary. Don't hang out with your fellow lab mates or, wherever while your poster is somewhere in the back of the session and you don't even know what's happening there. Many PIs I know complain that, we come to a great poster, but there's no one to talk to. The worst scenario that I can imagine is when a well-known expert passes by your poster, gets fascinated by the results, and wants to talk to you, wants to ask questions, and you're just not there. Another point is you may be able to present a talk and poster at the same time. Check out with your advisor and the conference organizer, because sometimes you can apply for both posters and a talk. It can be in different sessions. You can also apply with the same study or maybe different ones. So that's also possible when you have several projects and you have some progress in both. Maybe you can present both. Usually you cannot present two posters at the same time, but I definitely see students who present talks and posters, and it usually works out pretty well. But again, as long as the conference organizers are fine with that. So bigger conferences usually have enough space to accommodate more posters and more presenters. And in some oral sessions, there may be very few submissions, and they may actually look for extra presenters. So that might also be the case. If you have great work to show, why not? Talk to your advisor, talk to the conference organizers. Many students ask, should I present unpublished data or not? And what are the pros and cons? So here, there are a lot of things I can say, but I want to speak up. I think as PIs, we can really damage the careers of our students when we do not allow them to attend more conferences. And this usually happens when our students have results to present, but they are not published yet. But at the same time, obviously, attending a conference is still extremely important for them because students get extra motivated if they attend conferences early on in their PhDs. They can also see the scientific community for which their research will be important. So they make this important connection between what they do in the lab and the vast scientific community. They also see other students and build connections early on. So all this is extremely important for a successful PhD, and I'm perfectly convinced in that. So waiting until the paper appears online, I think it's a bad idea from the perspective of their careers and, of course, from the perspective of the entire PhD education. As a student or a postdoc, you want to make sure you ask your supervisor if you can submit an abstract while you're still working on your manuscript. So often the time of the conference is not at the time when you submit the abstract. There can be half a year in between or even a year. So maybe by that time you will be able to publish it finally. But at the same time, do not present data, results, or even a summary of unpublished studies unless you receive a confirmation from your supervisor. This is very important. Some students ask, why is that the case? If I collect the data, shouldn't it all belong to me? And in reality, in 99% of the cases, no. So first of all, universities and institutions have policies regarding who owns the data and who is responsible for it. And normally, this is the principal investigator. So it can be a professor, a staff scientist, group leader, but the person who is the principal investigator. Second, different funding bodies have different policies about the dissemination of results and data. So normally your supervisor is legally bound to follow those policies. And there is another point, which is that your study may be unfinished. Even if you think it's done, your supervisor may have a very different plan for it. For example, maybe he or she wants to apply for funding, do more experiments, or maybe even extending the study into a different field. But if you present unpublished data, it may ignite unwanted attention from the competing groups. And believe me, in academia, there's a lot of competition. We all love collaborations, but we compete a lot too. So basically, you and your supervisor may be scooped, which means that others will finish and publish the data, publish your results before you do it yourself. So Try to always ask your advisor a permission, and ideally by email, that you are free to show some of the data to the public. And also, of course, try to be specific, like, can I show this specific result and that specific result if it's not published? By the way, when you submit an abstract, you do not need to show your data in the abstract. You don't have to give all those details. You can just describe the general findings or make it rather general overall, so people will not guess all these know-hows and things that your advisor may be uncomfortable revealing at this moment. Now, if you get the permission and your abstract is accepted at the conference, there are many things you can do in advance. First, you can announce this on social media, and that's kind of obvious. Make sure you say that you're coming and your talk will be about this and this. Don't do this 2 months in advance, but doing so about a week in advance is a good idea. Make sure you say what your talk will be about, but don't just announce the title. Show a list of major points that people will learn from your talk. It also helps people feel connected to you, and it helps them figure out why they should come to you. Why your talk and not someone else's talk? Next, if you want to use a conference to explore other groups for your next career steps, this is also quite possible. For example, if you're a PhD student and you consider joining another group as a postdoc, but you're not yet interviewed there, you just think, okay, this is a great group, I like what they do, but I want to know a little bit more what's happening inside the group. Do I want to really join it? Is the culture the right one? And so in this case, I suggest that you get in touch with the students and postdocs from that group beforehand, so before the conference. And then at the conference, you can learn about their experience, you can talk to them. Now, if you do not know who's attending the conference from that specific group, you can always find the participant list in the list of abstracts, say, or online, because many conferences today, especially the big ones, they have all the participants in their databases or from the book of abstracts, like I said. It's pretty easy to reach out. It's also very easy to reach out. Just write an email saying that you would like to meet over a cup of coffee, or maybe have a lunch and then chat about the experience working in that group, or, for example, doing research in this specific field. But always be very polite and very, very professional. This is so important. And always leave the opportunity for the person to say no. Do not be pushy. This is bad. Not everyone has time, not everyone has interest. For example, you can end your email with something like, I understand that you may have no time for it, and if this is the case, this is totally fine. Maybe I will see you somewhere at the poster session. Sounds great. So you leave a certain chance for the person to not be impolite and reject you. Because again, not everyone has time. I also want to mention that I receive a lot of emails, and judging by the writing style, I can say that very few students seem to know how to write professionally. Some of them even ask, why does it matter? How exactly I write? Why I cannot say hi, prof? Or what's up? Shouldn't be about science and not about the actual style? Well, the reality is that it should be about the style too. Because if you behave professionally, your intentions will be perceived more positively, always, everywhere. And you will be taken more seriously, which is so important, especially by the people who have little time for such conversations, obviously, and who do not know you. So if they already know you, by all means, go ahead. But if you're approaching a stranger who's an expert in the field, or who's from the group where you want to apply for a postdoc, doesn't matter. You want to make sure you come across as a highly professional and polite person. Now, after the conference, don't forget to send short follow-up messages and stay in touch. It also actually concerns many other people that you meet during the conference, because it's a great way to build your network. If you want to schedule coffee time or lunch with a professor, it's very similar. Just be prepared that they may say no a lot more often because their schedules are very busy. So we meet a lot of people at conferences, and many meetings are scheduled in advance. But that's not like this for everyone. And again, many professors have gaps in schedule. They are open. Just make sure you reach out to them in advance and you can explain your interests. Many professors are pretty happy to help you navigate your career, your current or future research, but only as long as you can schedule it in advance. When I say in advance, of course, it means like a week at least. Maybe a few days in some cases when it's a small conference, but if it's a big conference like the American Chemical Society meeting, try to be very proactive. It's also very important to ask in advance because it shows that you're professional. It sets the right tone, that you're aware of their business. Also, don't write a very long email. Ideally, it should have no more than, say, 1,000 or 1,500 characters. So try not to be invasive and definitely never insist. If you receive no response, it means there is no interest. Just like that, when I email someone and I do not get any response, no problem. The person is not interested currently in interacting with me. That's not a problem. Don't see it as a rejection. People are very busy. They may have no time. And then if you schedule such a meeting, try to have your questions sorted out and figured out in advance. They should be ready because this shows that you're professional. You're not going to waste their time, but you also will ask the questions that are really important to you. Next, let your audience know about your talk. Send out your talk to potential listeners if they are listed among the conference attendants. Some of them may like to come, but only if the talk is relevant. This is especially useful at large conferences where most people don't have time to make perfect schedules. There are just too many talks and they mark some of them in their phones. Okay, I will come here, I will come there. But if you come with your talk forward and say, okay, this talk is very relevant to you, and this is why, and I hope to see you at my talk, the likelihood that the person will come is fairly high. Next, make sure you preview the conference program in advance and you save the talks that you want to attend. So some students and postdocs have difficulty selecting the best talks, which ones to attend and why. And in such case, I would suggest one simple principle. So attend only the talks that will be helpful for your next career steps. For example, if you want to find a postdoc position in the field of batteries, attend the talks by the professors whom you may consider joining. You'll be able to evaluate their research, get a sense of what motivates them, and maybe even talk to them during the coffee break or after their talk. If you plan to become a faculty, of course you want to attend then the talks in other fields, especially those where you don't feel too comfortable about, but you want to expand there maybe. It's also very helpful because often during faculty interviews, you may be asked questions about or from the perspective of other fields, because many professors who will be looking at your case, who will be in your committee, they will likely not understand your field well, but they know their own field. So of course, they will try to ask questions based on their own experience. So you want to make sure you're ready for this. And at the same time, if you go for faculty, you also want to attend more talks in your own field. And you want to make sure you get to know as many faculties and experts in your field as possible. So this is very important because during faculty interview, it's pretty common to discuss the big picture of your research and what competitors are doing in your field and who they are. So attending more talks, of course, will give you more information about that. And you also will be a lot more confident in that regard. Now, if you want to move to industry, then obviously you want to focus on the talks that are related to that specific industry. The next tip is prepare your pitch. So a pitch is a short talk about who you are and what you work on. It can be helpful when people approach you for a quick conversation. As you probably know, at conferences, we have a lot of these small talks. And It's also helpful when you're too tired. So it may be getting hard to come up with a short description of who you are and what you work on, and your pitch can save you. And for this, I suggest that you write down 5 to 8 sentences that should be very clear and that can take only 20, 30 seconds to say. Don't make it dry. Try to integrate some personal story into it. Basically, personalize it and make it more about you, your journey, your work, and not just about just the findings or your specific research. Your personality is very important for a successful pitch. Imagine you're a startup founder and you're at the event where other founders and VCs are hanging out. So you don't want to bore them with a 5-minute unprepared talk about yourself, right? So instead, you want to be ready to present yourself in a very short time, like say 20, 30 seconds, and also separately try to prepare one sentence that could convey what you work on. Just one sentence, because sometimes you don't have those 20, 30 seconds. You have only one sentence to say. If you create a core pitch and you're able to say it in any situation, then you will be prepared to adjust it also in every situation. So basically, you want to make sure you have some room for improvisation. Every person who approaches you is different, so you want to be prepared for everyone. And in that sense, a good pitch, it's not a sales talk. So it should be strong, and it should be focused on you, and it should show that you are valuable as a researcher, as a person. So ideally, it should be, of course, genuine, interesting, and not demanding. It shouldn't create a sense of that you're trying to get something from the person. Also, when you're working on your pitch, think of the questions. So, for example, what questions are you trying to answer with your research? What is important in your research and to whom? What are broader implications? And most importantly, why you? How is your story integrated into it? Be prepared that some people will not be interested in your pitch, no matter what you say. So don't be too concerned about it, too focused on that. Just try to maximize the quality of it and just enjoy. One of the most important points of a conference is to give a talk. I absolutely urge you to invest your time into your presentation, into your poster as much as possible. I will have a separate episode as to how to improve your talks, how to make your talks much stronger, much more memorable. But for now, just keep in mind that the amount of time and energy you put into it, it directly correlates with the impact. To present yourself well, you don't need a perfect research. What you need is just a perfect presentation. Now let's discuss how you can maximize the outcome when you're already at the conference. So, point number 1, do not hang out with your group members. I know it sounds strange, right? But they are the only people you know at the conference sometimes, and that is what limits your interactions with others. The entire point of attending a conference is to get to know people. So, hanging out with your own lab members, it's one of the biggest mistakes that I see students making. Do your best to avoid spending time with your group members. Just be polite and say, okay, great, but I'm going to have lunch with this person and lunch with that person next day. Focus on the conference, on the people who are outside of your network. You can reconnect with some people from your current network, yes, of course, but I would also try to focus on building new connections, because that's where the conference is really important. This is where you can really use it to your best advantage. Number 2, the second biggest mistake is when you're sitting in your session because you feel like you have to. Because it's quite rare that in one session, all talks will be so amazing. And staying at talks that bring you little value is not what I would suggest. Second, listening to great talks from other fields and getting that sense of diversity, I think it's absolutely important, especially if you want to stay in academia. And this is why I would strongly suggest reviewing all sessions and all talks before the conference. Sometimes there are hundreds of them, I know, but I think it's well worth it because you will be ready to switch the room and know where to go next. Now, you want to attend talks outside your field to explore other topics, especially if they are given by prominent people, because they set the milestones. You see, this is why we like attending talks of people who are the best in their fields. We look for new ideas, new vision. So sitting in the session or attending a session only because my talk is there, it makes no sense to me. And I suggest that you follow the same principle. Number 3, visit industry exhibitions and gatherings. Talk to industry folks. Ask them about their work, how they transitioned from academia to industry. Try to explore what in industry they really like and what they look for if they want to hire someone. You can also schedule lunches and coffees with them. Actually, many of them are very open to this. So some of them are really longing to share experience. Number 4, attend faculty poster sessions if your conference has them. You want to apply to such sessions and try yourself out there because it's a great chance to feel a little bit like a faculty candidate, to start developing some kind of vision. Even if you don't want to stay in academia, it's still a great practice as to how you come up with great vision. But even if you don't apply, you can still come and look at other candidates and their research proposals. I think it's incredibly important if you plan to stay in academia. Number 5, some conferences offer mentorship sessions, especially the big ones, the big conferences. Maybe you can find a mentor there, and so attend those sessions and see if you can make the right connections, because those mentors can go a long way for you. Number 6, social events are extremely important, so don't ignore them. Make sure you attend them. However, there is a thing to keep in mind. Check out their availability in advance because they may require registration, they may have a limited number of seats, and some of them may be for a fee. And these small gatherings can be very helpful because you have a chance to have a long conversations with people who are sort of stuck in the same room discussing different things. The point is you have a lot more time to interact with people than normally. The less formal the atmosphere, of course, the easier it is to approach those you want to talk to. And this is where the small gatherings are really important. So if you are a student and postdoc, if there is an attendance fee that is required, then you want to talk to your advisor and see if this can be reimbursed. Now, there is an important point about collaborations. This is point number 7. There are several ways to go if you want to look for a collaboration. If you're a student and or a postdoc, make sure your supervisor is perfectly fine with you looking for collaborations. And the reason is that technically, in most cases, supervisors are responsible for the research that is done in their lab. And so they should keep an eye on collaborations too, obviously. And there is another thing to keep in mind, that collaborations are normally built around specific research projects or some ideas. It can be the current idea or the future project, whatever. But you cannot just have a collaboration without any research involved. So if you don't have any project in mind or any idea, it may be more difficult to build connections, of course. And this is why I think it's great when you have a chance to discuss your potential collaboration projects with your advisor. And this is where I think what can help is to first discuss with your supervisor the possible ways that you can collaborate within your project. So your supervisor can tell you in which way you can find a collaborator, in which direction, and up to what extent can you discuss the collaborative efforts at a conference. Number 8, ask some really good questions at talks and try to follow up on those that are important to you. And when I say good questions, of course, I don't mean that those that put the speaker in an uncomfortable position, because it also happens. Great questions, they result in great attention and a very good connection, especially after the talk. You can build your connection by standing out. So don't ask questions and run away. This is the mistakes that I see that people make. They just ask a question, then they disappear. You can always follow up after the talk is over and talk to the speaker a bit more and see if there are deeper connections you can make. Number 9, if you're a student and you have specific groups in mind that you wish to join as a postdoc, so use this conference as an opportunity. And that means that you want to talk to students and postdocs from those groups. You can talk to them at poster sessions or at their oral sessions. Pay attention to what they discuss and how insightful they are. Try to build connections with them because they may help you get connected with their PI at a later stage. This happens. This is one of the ways to get connected with the PI. I would put it this way. Number 10, meet your PI's collaborators in person and schedule lunches with them or coffee breaks. What we often see is that great collaborators of our PIs, they can become our own collaborators in the future. So if you have an already existing bridge, which is your PI and maybe your even project that you all jointly work on, why not just having some more conversations about it? Number 11, at the end of each day, if you've got some really interesting and important information, make sure you write it down somewhere because important contacts and important discussions, they can be forgotten. Ideally, you want to make sure you summarize your day and you see who you got connected with and what sort of new information you learned, what talks were interesting, what papers you want to read, what references you learned about, etc., etc.